Being seen as an occasion for a march on Washington that is co-sponsored by an organization that's calling for the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. It may sound like an extreme description. In any rational understanding of the range of American politics, it is quite extreme. But it's important to know about American politics right now that the conservatives attending these rallies aren't necessarily just the extreme. That was Eric Cantor, who you saw addressing a kickoff rally for the 9/12 movement. He's the second-ranking Republican in the House of Representatives, standing at the Freedom Works podium at the 9/12 March kickoff event, receiving the "You Lie" serenade as he rails against the president. In Beltway common wisdom, Eric Cantor is supposed to be the poster boy for Republican reasonableness, the counterweight to the fringe. Republican Congressman Mike Pence of Indiana is seen as a potential Republican presidential candidate in 2012. He is one of the scheduled speakers at the march on Saturday. Now, Mr. Pence is considered to be one of the more conservative potential GOP presidential candidates in 2012, admittedly. A man who is supposed to be the big moderate among the Republican 2012 hopefuls is Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty. Mr. Pawlenty is not scheduled to be at the 9/12 march, but he did make news this week for continuing to push the deathers theory about health reform on MSNBC this morning, and for yesterday declaring himself a tenther, arguing that maybe states should consider seceding from any federal health reform effort. In a conference call sponsored by the Republican Governors Association last night, Governor Pawlenty endorsed Texas Governor Rick Perry's call for state sovereignty in the face of horrible federal overreach, like health reform. Like Mr. Cantor, Governor Pawlenty is the guy who is supposed to represent moderation in the current Republican Party. Moderation in the current Republican Party now apparently encompasses advocating or flirting with the idea of states seceding from the Union, disestablishing the country, in other words. If this counts as moderate, what counts as extreme now? Actually, don't answer that. Joining us now is Mike Lux. He's the co-founder and CEO of a consulting firm that's called Progressive Strategies. Mr. Lux, thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel.
The reason I wanted to talk to you today about Congressman Joe Wilson yelling at the president and the March on Washington for the 9/11 anniversary this weekend is because you wrote at Huffington Post today that these developments on the right should be seen as sort of a modern variant of a specific kind of historical conservatism. You called it Calhoun conservatism. What do you mean by that?
Well, John C. Calhoun, the senator from South Carolina, ironically, back in the 1830s to 1850s, was the founder, really, of this modern conservatism. He married the idea of states' rights with a very virulent, racist, patriarchal conservatism, and basically said states, have the ability to do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it. They can secede from the Union. They can nullify laws that are passed by the federal government. They can ignore the Bill of Rights if they want to. They can do whatever they want to do.
Do you think that this enthusiasm for secession that we're seeing now, not just from Governor Rick Perry, but also from supposed moderates like Governor Tim Pawlenty of Minnesota, do you see it then as not a random offshoot of other forms of extremism we're seeing right now? Do you see it as central to this type of conservative philosophy?
It is central to this type of conservative philosophy. I mean, Ronald Reagan, back in the 1980 campaign, kicked off his general election campaign by going to Philadelphia, Mississippi, a tiny little town far away from a media market in a state that he was going to win easily, and that was the town where Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodwin were murdered. And he gave a speech on extolling states' rights, the old John C. Calhoun states' rights. His quotes could have come out of John C. Calhoun. This conservatism is very much a part of the modern Republican Party.
But in terms of I think that states' rights, I think you're right that it does surface in conservatism over time and time again. But what we're seeing right now, I'm trying to tie together the different surprising and radical-seeming things that we're hearing from conservatives right now. It's secession. It's this 10th Amendment stuff. It is the birther thing, the idea that the president is not legitimately the president, and it's also a form of tactical extremism and sort of disrespect toward federal authority. If there's a fundamental belief that secession is a good idea, the sort of extremism around states' rights, Is there a connection between that and these other things? A basic idea that the federal government is an illegitimate source of authority right now?
Oh, absolutely. We're not seeing this talk of secession come up by accident. This is what these folks have always believed, but they're talking about it now with a new president who they think is a terrible liberal. They're raising it right now because it really appeals to their base. The right-wing Republican base, which dominates the primary elections for the Republican Party, they love this stuff. They love disrespecting the president. They love disrespecting the federal government. They hate the government. And it's become really almost sociopathic.
It is difficult, I have to say, to see this sort of anti-government, anti-U.S. in the sense of the secession stuff being against the country, staying the country, tied to the 9/11 attacks, which were an attack on the United States, an attempt to do as much harm to this country as possible. It took more than 3,000 lives. I can't see a link between the type of conservatism that you're describing, and I think Calhoun conservatism is a useful way to at least try to understand it. I can't see a link between that and violence to the U.S. government that is anything other than the obvious, scary threat of a link. Do you see a connection?
Well, I think what the connection is that the folks who are pushing this idea, their vision of America is a vision where it's controlled by the old-time, white people, white men, wealthy people. I mean, that was John C. Calhoun's vision of America. He didn't believe in democracy. He thought Jefferson's idea of equality was a terrible idea. And that's what these Republicans think of. And so when they see frankly, when they see a black man as president of the United States, when they see immigrants coming into this country, they don't think of that as America anymore. It's like the country's been taken away from them, and it makes them prone toward this kind of violence.
Mike Lux, co-founder and CEO of the consulting firm Progressive Strategies. Thanks for writing that thought-provoking piece for OpenLeft.com and Huffington Post today. And thanks for joining us tonight, Mike.
Thanks, Rachel.
Appreciate it.